Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out Poisoner in Chief. Still in the chapter called Health Alternative Committee. Yes, the gangster, handsome Johnny Roselli, told an inquiring CIA man he had associates in Cuba who could kill Fidel Castro. No, he didn't like the idea of trying to gun down Castro gangland style or using a sniper to do the job. The shooter would almost certainly be killed or captured. Roselli said he would prefer something nice and clean, without getting into any kind of out of ambushing. He and his mafia partner, Sam Giancana, offered the CIA a counter proposal. Give us poison and takes time to kill, so our assassin can escape before Castro falls ill and dies. Senior officers at the CIA liked the idea. Sidney Gottlieb had been a new assignment. On May 13, 1960, after hearing a briefing from Allen Dulles, President Eisenhower ordered Castro sawed off. He did not use what CIA Security Director Sheffield Edwards later called bad words, but everyone present understood this as a presidential directive to remove Castro from power by any means, including assassination. That gave Richard Bissell and his Covert Action Directorate another murder to plan, since it would entail making poison and devices by which it could be delivered. Bissell soon turned to what had been the Technical Services Staff, now renamed the Technical Service Division. Sidney Gottlieb was the man for the job. At first, Gottlieb and his small corps of chemists concentrated on ways to cause Castro's downfall by non-lethal means. They came up with two options. The first grew from Gottlieb's long fascination with LSD. As part of his work directing Operation Midnight Climax, he had planned an experiment, ultimately canceling because of weather conditions, in which he had aerosol laced with LSD would be sprayed into a room of unsuspecting partygoers. He had tested such of an aerosol on George Hunter White's pad in San Francisco. It might now be sprayed in a radio studio from which Castro made live broadcasts and reached millions of Cubans. If the offer, then assigned to the Western Hemisphere Division, who had approached him with the scheme, although there well may have been such a plot, the officer Gottlieb named was then assigned in India, and he never worked in the WH Division nor had anything to do with Cuba operations. Gottlieb remembers the scheme as being one that was talked about frequently but not widely, and as being concerned with killing, not merely influencing behavior. The poisoned Cohiba cigars, Castro's preferred brand, was passed to Jacob Esterline, a CIA officer working on the anti-Castro plot. No way was ever found to deliver them. They remained in a CIA safe. 7 years later, one was removed for testing. It had retained 94% of its toxicity. The first bumbling attempt hardly satisfied Bissell. He decided to consult professionals with more expertise in murder. That led him to handsome Johnny Roselli, who, along with the other powerful gangsters which had become rich through gambling, prostitution, drug dealing in Cuba, they were determined to destroy Castro before he could carry out his promise to rid the country of crime and vice. Roselli had a web of contacts from a Havana underworld, which made him an ideal partner for the CIA. Roselli's suggestion that the assassination be carried out by poison can be an opportune moment. He had never heard of Gottlieb, no one had, but he correctly presumed that the CIA must have been someone on its payroll who made poison. Stars were aligning. The CIA had made contact with gangsters who wanted Castro dead. The gangsters wanted poison. Gottlieb could provide it. Finding ways to kill Castro without firearms, and at some points in the plotting to kill his brother Raul and the guerrilla hero Che Guevara, became one of Gottlieb's main preoccupations after his return from the Congo. He challenged, tested his peculiarity, creative imagination, rose to the top of his priority list for some reason, rose to the top for Bissell and Dulles. The assassination had been ordered by the President of the United States. From Eisenhower, the chain of command was short and direct. He gave the orders to Dulles and Bissell. Bissell turned to the retroubled Sheffield Edwards, who was head of the Office of Security, was keeper of CIA's deepest secrets. Edward chose an intermediary who could approach mafia figures without being clearly tied to the CIA. Robert Mayhew, a former FBI agent who had become a private detective and worked for the reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes, Mayhew became the conduit through which the CIA passed instructions and devices to gangsters who were to assassinate Castro. Gottlieb's role was to provide the means of killing. Through the partnership agreement known as N.K. Naomi, he had access to scientists at Fort Detrick. Together, they conceived a series of ways to assassinate Castro. These included, according to a Senate investigation conducted years later, poison pills, poison pens, deadly bacteria powders, and other devices which strained the imagination. Plotted against Castro did not end when Eisenhower left office at the beginning of '61. His successor, John F. Kennedy, turned out to be equally determined to eliminate Castro. The spectacular collapse of the CIA's 1961 invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs intensified his determination. Kennedy and Attorney General Robert Kennedy, his brother, relentlessly pressured the CIA to crush Castro repeatedly, demanded explanation of why he had not been accomplished. Samuel Halpern, who served at the top level of the Security Action Directorate during this period, asserted that the Kennedys were on our back constantly. They were just absolutely obsessed with getting rid of Castro. Richard Helms felt the pressure directly. There was a flat-out effort ordered by the White House, the President, Bobby Kennedy, who was after all his right-hand man on these matters, to unseat the Castro government, to do everything possible to get rid of it by whatever device could be found. Helms later testified the Bay of Pigs was part of this effort, and after the Bay of Pigs fell, there was even a greater push to try to get rid of this communist influence 90 miles from the United States shores. The principal driving force was the Attorney General Robert Kennedy. There isn't any question about this. For nearly 40 years, pressure from the White House kept Gottlieb as well as the CIA supporters fully focusing on killing Castro. The idea of using a sniper to carry out the deed remained active, but it was never seemed truly realistic. At one point, the Technical Services Division considered crafting what appeared to be a rare seashell, placed a bomb inside, and planting it in an area where Castro liked to scuba dive. The plan was also rejected and impractical. According to a CIA report, none of the shells that might conceivably be found in the Caribbean was both spectacular enough to be sure of attracting attention and large enough to hold the needed amount of explosive. The midget submarine that would have had to be used to emplacement of the shell was too short in operation range for such an operation. What remained was poison. Gottlieb and his colleagues were tasked with making it and imagining how it would be delivered. One of their ideas was based like in adopting aborted exploding seashell plot and Castro's documented love of scuba diving. President Kennedy was chosen as lawyer named James Donovan, the same man Tom Hanks would play in Bridge of Spies, to negotiate the release of Cuban American prisoners who were captured during the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. The CIA came up with the idea of giving Donovan a tainted diving suit to present to Castro. Preparing such a suit was precisely the kind of assignment for which the Technical Service Division had been created. TSD brought a diving suit, dusted it with a fungus, which would produce a Madura foot, a chronic skin disease, and contaminated the breathing apparatus of the tuberculosis, the CIA officer wrote years later. The plan was abandoned when the lawyer decided to present Castro with a different diving suit. The failures brought the CIA and the Technical Services Division and Gottlieb back to Roselli's original idea: make poison and find a way to feed it to Castro. According to the official summary of the later interview with Cornelius Roosevelt, who was then head of the Technical Service Divisions, 4 possible approaches were considered. 1. Something highly toxic, such as shellfish, to be administered with a pen, which Roosevelt said was what was supplied to Gary Powers. 2. A bacterial material in liquid form. 3. Bacterial treatment of a cigar or cigarette and a handkerchief treated with bacteria. The decision, to the best of his recollection, was that bacteria in liquid form was the best means because Castro frequently drank tea, coffee, or bouillon, in which liquid poison would not be particularly well suited, despite the decision that the poison in liquid form would be the most desirable. What was actually prepared and delivered was a solid in the form of small pills, about the size of saccharin tablets. The CIA never fully abandoned the idea of killing Castro with firearms. Evidence suggests that it arranged to smuggle rifles and at least one point silencer into Cuba for this purpose. Nevertheless, the idea of using poison remained the most appealing option. During 61 and 62, intermediaries working for the CIA passed several packets of Gottlieb's botulinum pills, called L pills, because they were lethal, to mafia gangsters for delivery to contacts in Cuba. One batch could be used because the Cuban official who was to place the pills in Castro's food was transferred to a post in which he no longer had access to the Cuban leader. Pills from another batch would have been slipped into Castro's food or drink at a restaurant he frequented, but for unknown reasons he stopped visiting that restaurant. Choosing the potion that was not Gottlieb's only contribution to the Castro assassination plot, he and his staff also produced two devices for delivering it. The first is described in a CIA report as a pencil, designed as a concealment device to delivering the pills. More elaborate was what the report called a ballpoint pen, which he had a hypodermic needle inside. And when you pushed the lever, the needle came out and the poison could be ejected into someone. According to another description, the needle was designed to be so fine that the target Castro would not sense its insertion and the agent would have time to escape before the effects were noticed. The date on which the CIA officer in Paris handed this pen to the Cuban CIA asset is poignant. November 22nd, 1963, the same day President Kennedy was assassinated. Kennedy's successor, Lyndon Johnson, continued to use political and economic means, including sabotage and other forms of covert action to undermine Cuba's revolutionary government. He also, however, concluded that we have been operating a goddamn murder incorporated in the Caribbean and put an end to assassination plots. One Cuban agent who had received firearms and explosives from the CIA remained in contact with the agency until 65, but he never carried out an attack. Talk of murder by chemicals ceased. Making poison to kill foreign leaders would never again be part of Gottlieb's job. That's the end of that chapter. The next chapter is called We Must Always Remember to Thank the CIA. If you think there's any truth here on what I'm saying or doing, please like and subscribe and have a wonderful day. God bless all the people that watch my stream.